The first piece that I'd like to share with you is based on part of an important letter written by the Rav Yosef Soloveitchik, in 1972. Now, it deals in part, generally, with some of the themes of Bereshis, the book of Genesis, but it also addresses another critical topic that I feel we must address now, and that is, in March 2020, there was a rupture between synagogues and Jews. It was necessary to protect health due to COVID. But since that moment, I have continuously considered and I am frequently asked, when COVID finally eases, will Jews come back to Shul? Now, after thinking about this for over a year and a half and discussing it with many, many others here and in other places, my answer is, I don't know. Certainly there is a core, those who are attending Shul now, who have tried to attend this entire time through difficulty and limitations and inconvenience, for whom prayer is a priority. May they be blessed, and may they increase, and may they deserve reward for their tremendous effort. But I fear that some Jews for whom attending Shul is not a priority, that they will continue to use COVID as an excuse not to return, even though attending a dath with our precautions is certainly safer than going to the store, eating at a restaurant, visiting with friends, going to school, or traveling. But I fear that COVID is still being used as an excuse not to return to Shul by many of those for whom it's just not a priority. Or many people will just have fallen out of the habit of coming to Shul. I don't know. But I am certain that I, and all of us, and throughout the Jewish world, must devote ourselves to getting those Jews back. Now, I see three components to this issue, and hopefully, the reason I want to discuss it with you tonight, hopefully, COVID is truly easing. And working on these three components should be our priority now. Number one, we need to re-engineer the synagogue. We start with a blank canvas. Everything, except what is required by halacha, by Jewish law, everything is up for discussion. The length of the services, the style, the format, what we include, what we leave behind. Again, aside from what halacha requires. But there is so much to learn from having halted Shul and from holding services with various limitations as health requirements evolved. So we need to collaborate. We need to discuss and apply these ideas in a smart, responsive manner. We have begun this process, and I ask for your input. I invite your ideas as we figure this out together. That's number one. Component number 2. We need to improve and showcase those aspects of attending shul that people will readily value. Socializing, enjoying spending time at Kiddush, which should be expanded, reminding people of synagogue's superb ability to celebrate and to console as a community, to remove loneliness, to create friends, to network, to find opportunities to help others and to be helped by others, to offer opportunities for prayer that are spiritual and inspiring, with abundant music and joy, to offer classes that are exciting and challenging and transformative, and to offer programming and events that are creative and can't be found elsewhere. There is so much that we do well, that we do better than anywhere else. We need to improve it. We need to showcase it to attract people back. But the third component is the topic I want to address tonight. And that is to remind ourselves and to share with others the existential benefits of joining at Shul for prayer. So, in this letter, part of which I want to share with you, the Rav's words written in 1972 are just as, if not more, relevant to us today. He begins, "The synagogue nowadays is not the most popular institution in the Jewish community. The Jewish community is not too much in love with Shul. The members of this community stay away from the synagogue." So it's the Rav's goal in this letter, and it's our goal, to change that through a deeper understanding of the synagogue as an idea, not just as an institution, as a vision. We need to explain what tefillah is and what Beit HaKnesset, the classic term for a synagogue, the house dedicated to prayer, what does that mean? And how deeply rooted these ideas are in our philosophy of man and his destiny. So let's start with an enigmatic passage in the Talmud. The Talmud says, Masechta Shabbos, there are two mistakes, sins, that are considered serious by the rabbis in the Talmud. The first is al shekorin la'aron hakodesh arna, one who refers to the Aron HaKodesh, the holy ark in which the Torah scrolls are kept in the shul. One who refers to that as a closet or a cabinet. Va'al shekorin lebeis HaKnesses Beit Am, and one who refers to a Beit HaKnesses, which literally means a house of assembly, a house of gathering, which is the original term for a shul, for a synagogue, refers to that as a Beit Am, a house of the people. Now, the first violation is relatively straightforward. Aron HaKodesh, the holy ark, refers to the place where the Torah scroll is kept because the Torah is the holiest and the place where it is kept is holy. For someone to refer to that as a closet or a cabinet is to remove the holiness from it, to remove the sanctity from it. It is as if they are referring to the Torah in secular terms, without any religious or spiritual component. And that's an act of sacrilege, to secularize the Torah. That we understand. But what does the Talmud mean? What do the rabbis mean when they criticize one who refers to a Beit HaKnesset as a Beit Am? On the surface, the two terms are not so different. Beit HaKnesset, a house of assembly, a house of gathering. Beit Am, a house of the people. What is the semantic difference between those two terms that causes the rabbis to approve of the first but condemn the second? The book of Bereshit, the Torah, the book of Genesis, begins with creation, culminating with the creation of man. And man, Adam and Eve, Adam and Chava, are placed in Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden. And then they were cursed by God, and they were expelled from paradise. And man became a homeless being. Writes the Rav, exiled man or homeless man must pray. He has a strong need to pray. Through prayer, he redeems himself from his loneliness. To pray means to return home. In explaining this, the Rav asks, why does Jewish law require a synagogue to begin with? Why isn't it sufficient just to pray anywhere, in a field, at home? And yes, of course, a person can pray anywhere. But why does Jewish law show a preference that a person should try to pray in a synagogue? And by the way, that's not only when praying together with a minyan. Even if a person is praying by themselves, it is still preferable, according to Jewish law, to pray in a synagogue. Why? It's not because of the physical structure. There are some shuls that are more beautiful, some shuls that are less beautiful, but the structure of the building does not interest Jewish law. Yes, you want to make it nice, but there is no aspect of Jewish law that applies to the building itself. But the Rav explains the word bayit, or bait, same word, has a double connotation. It means house, which is a physical structure that has walls and a floor and a ceiling. But bayit, or base, also means home. And we make a mistake when we translate Beit HaKnesset as the house of prayer. That's not true, because there's no need for a house of prayer. I can pray to God anywhere. Beit HaKnesset is not a house of prayer, but a home of prayer. Prayer is coming home. The home of man. The home of homeless man that alleviates the status of homelessness. Beit HaKnesset is not the home of God God doesn't need a home. Beit HaKnesset, a synagogue, is the home of man where he keeps an appointment with God in prayer. God comes to that home in order to keep his appointment with man. That's Shul. That's a Beit HaKnesset. But who is gathered there? Who is it that is gathered in this place of gathering, this home of prayer? Well, there are two terms that we're familiar with. There's a term minyan. Now, the word minyan literally means number. It refers to the number 10, and it refers to the fact that when 10 Jewish adult men are gathered, then all of those who gather, men, women, children, are able to pray not as individuals, but as a collective, to say those prayers that require a minyan, like reading from the Torah, like Kaddish and Baruch Hu and Kedusha, that require a minyan. There's another term, tzibur. Often we translate the word tzibur as congregation or community. But I will show you in a moment that those translations are inadequate. So let's try to analyze these two terms, minyan and tzibur. Are they the same? Now, in common usage, we use them interchangeably. We say we're going to daven with a minyan as opposed to davening alone. We say we're going to daven tefillah b'tzibur, the tzibur prayers. But the truth is, the two terms are not the same, and the difference is crucial. It's subtle, but it's crucial. To understand the term tzibur, let's draw from where it is originally used concerning karbanos, the sacrifices. Remember, we've discussed this before, the sacrifice, our prayers were instituted on the model of the karbanos, the offerings, the sacrifices. And just like with sacrifices, there was a karban yachid, an offering brought by an individual, and a karban tzibur, an offering brought by the tzibur. What does that mean? Tzibur means the entire Jewish covenantal community. Tzibur refers not to the 10 or 15 or 100 or 500 people who are in the room. That's the minyan, the people in the room who can see each other in a physical sense. Tzibur refers to the entire Jewish covenantal community. The Torah says, V'nikdashti b'soch b'nei Yisrael. God says, I will be sanctified within all of my people. Only when all of my people are gathered together and pray as one unit will I be sanctified with what we refer to as public prayer. Well, there's a discrepancy because on the one hand, the Torah says we can only pray to God, we can only sanctify God's name with prayer when the entire Jewish world is gathered together. On the other hand, we have this idea, just 10 people in a room, 10 men in a room, and we have public prayer. Which is it? The 10 people in the room, that form a minyan, or the 15, or the 25, the 50, the 500, the people in the room that form a minyan are the representatives of Knesset Yisrael. Knesset Yisrael is the entirety of the Jewish people, every single Jewish person anywhere. Knesset Yisrael, that word Knesset is the same word as Beis HaKnesses. Gathered together, not just the people in the room, but all Jews everywhere. When there is a minyan in the room, that minyan somehow is more than just the individuals in the room. It is actually a conglomeration of an entire people. And not just the 15 million or so Jews who are alive today, but Knesset Yisrael, what is gathered in the Beit HaKnesses, includes every Jew who has ever lived. It includes all those whose names have been immortalized and made unforgettable, as well as all those Jews who lived in anonymity, who died silently and were buried in unmarked graves without leaving a single memory, without leaving a single footprint on the shifting sands of human destiny. All of them, great or small, big or little, are part and parcel of that invisible Knesset Yisrael, which is represented, or to be more exact, impersonated by the minyan of the individuals who are in the room together. But that's not all. The Rav continues. Furthermore, the Knesset Yisrael holds within her embrace every Jew who will ever live on the face of the globe. Generations yet unborn who will at some point in the dark, awesome future serve our people in a variety of ways. All of them belong to the invisible Knesset Yisrael, represented by the few individuals who happen to show up in the shul on a rainy winter afternoon. And they come to shul and they begin to daven and they say, Ashrei Yoshvei Veisecha, praiseworthy are those who dwell in your home. Who are those? Who are the Yoshvei Veisecha? Knesset Yisrael. Every Jew in the world who is living, who has lived, who will live, is incorporated and represented when a minyan gathers in shul. That's what is represented by our Beit HaKnesses, the gathering of Knesset Yisrael. And it's only then that we are able to praise God and sanctify His name with those prayers that require a minyan. What is the mistake, the sin of referring to a shul as a Beit Am? Beit Am, a house of the people. That implies that the significance of shul is the individuals who happen to be in the room. That's a terrible mistake. The Beit HaKnesset is the home of the great invisible Knesset Yisrael, which cuts through all ages in millennia. A Beit Knesset is eternal. A Beit Am is just for contemporaries. But to pray with contemporaries is not enough. To go back to the language of the sacrifices, a sacrifice that's brought by 10 people is not a karban tzibur, it's called a karban shutfim, an offering brought by partners, a group of individuals. Karban tzibur, tefillah b'tzibur, is when the entire covenantal community is gathered and represented. And it is the home of Knesset Yisrael where God has a rendezvous with man. And that is available only in Shul. You can pray as an individual anywhere, but you can only overcome your existential exile and join with every Jew as one organic entity, past, present, and future, with whom God will meet face to face only in Shul. You can only participate in the eternal Jewish people in the home to which we have invited God, and He is accepted in Shul, like at a dath. My dear friends, this is what awaits you. If you have not done so already, it's time to come home. It's time to come back to Shul. If you are seriously immunocompromised, or you are just staying at home, I respect that. But when the precautions that we are taking at a dath are stronger than the stores you go to, and the restaurants you visit, and the social gatherings you attend, it's time to come back to Shul, to our Beit HaKnesset, our home of prayer at which God is waiting to meet us, all of us, together.